Once upon a time. Danielle the meat seller. Danielle adjusted her stall in the bustling marketplace, arranging the meat neatly on display. She had worked hard to save enough money to open her own business, and today marked her first day as a market vendor. Her heart raced with excitement and a bit of nervousness. She'd grown up watching her mother sell vegetables, and now it was her turn to create a livelihood. Fresh meat. Fresh meat here, she called out, hoping to attract her first customers. People walked by, some glancing her way. She offered a warm smile to everyone who made eye contact. An older man finally stopped, examining her selection with interest. "How's the meat?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's the best, sir," Danielle responded confidently. He nodded, approving her sincerity, and bought a cut. As he walked away, a small wave of relief washed over her. She had made her first sale. Soon, a few more curious customers approached, intrigued by her friendly demeanor. Each sale fueled her confidence. By the end of the day, Danielle knew she was on the path to success. The next morning, Danielle returned to her stall, eager to build on yesterday's success. She set up her meat with care, adding a few herbs for extra appeal. She could see other vendors glancing her way, sizing up the new competition. Danielle ignored them, focusing on her goal. A family approached, looking over her selection with interest. "Good morning. Would you like a fresh cut?" Danielle asked with a warm smile. The mother nodded, and they soon left with a bundle of meat. More people stopped by, curious about the friendly young vendor. With each sale, Danielle's confidence grew, her voice louder and her smile brighter. By midday, she had sold more than half of her stock. The familiar weight of coins in her hand felt reassuring. She was beginning to feel like she belonged here. Just as Danielle thought the day couldn't get any better, a new stall appeared across the market. The stall was larger, with bright signs and polished displays. A man in an expensive suit stood behind it, offering cuts of meat at much lower prices than Danielle could afford. He had already drawn a crowd, and soon people began to drift away from Danielle's stall. She watched as some of her regulars turned to the new vendor, lured by the cheaper prices. A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. She had worked so hard for this, and now it felt like her small victory was slipping away. "Don't worry," an elderly vendor nearby called out to her. "You've got something they don't, quality." But even her comforting words couldn't shake the growing worry inside Danielle. She wasn't sure how she would compete with someone who seemed to have more resources and experience. The following days were tough. Danielle's stall remained quiet while the new vendor's business boomed. She tried lowering her prices, but it didn't help. Customers were more drawn to the flashy stall, the promises of discounts, and the smooth-talking salesman. Danielle felt discouraged, but she refused to give up. She started waking up earlier each day, determined to find a way to stand out. One morning, as she arranged her meats, an idea came to her. What if she offered something different? Something no one else had? She decided to create a unique recipe, something special that would give people a reason to come back to her. Danielle spent the rest of the day experimenting with spices, marinades, and different cooking methods. After a few tries, she finally found a blend that made her meat stand out. The next morning, she proudly displayed her new product, hoping it would attract attention. Danielle stood behind her stall, watching the sun rise over the marketplace. She had prepared the meat with her special seasoning and marinated it overnight, hoping it would bring customers back. As the market slowly came to life, she smiled to herself, feeling hopeful. A few curious passers-by stopped, drawn in by the rich aroma. "What's that smell?" one of them asked, her eyes widening. "It's my special blend," Danielle replied, smiling. "Try a sample, I guarantee you'll love it." The woman hesitated but then agreed to try a bite. As soon as she tasted the meat, her face lit up. "This is amazing," she exclaimed. "I'll take 2 pieces." Danielle beamed with pride as she wrapped the meat, grateful for the woman's praise. Soon, other customers came over, intrigued by the scent, and one by one, they sampled her new recipe. Word quickly spread about Danielle's special blend. By the end of the day, her stall was full of customers, all eager to taste her unique creation. She had found the key to standing out in a crowded market, and it was her own recipe. The next morning, as Danielle prepared her stall, she overheard two women whispering nearby. "Have you heard? That new meat seller's stuff isn't fresh. I heard she's cutting corners." Danielle frowned, catching snatches of conversation as people walked by her stall. It wasn't the first time she'd heard rumors like this, but it stung all the same. Later that day, a man came up to her stall, eyeing her products with suspicion. "You sure this is fresh?" he asked, tapping his fingers on the meat. Danielle's heart skipped a beat, but she forced a smile. "I get my meat fresh every morning," she assured him. He gave her a long look but finally bought a piece, though he still seemed unsure. As the day wore on, more customers hesitated to approach her stall, casting uncertain glances at the competitor's booth across the way. Danielle knew the rumors were coming from her rival. She had seen him talking to a few of the market's regulars, his face sly and confident. It was clear he wanted to crush her spirit. Determined not to let this setback stop her, Danielle took a deep breath and stood taller. "I won't let them win," she murmured to herself, grabbing a fresh batch of meat to prepare for the next wave of customers. Danielle refused to let the rumors defeat her. She spent hours that evening working on perfecting her meat cuts and seasoning, determined to prove herself. The next day, she arrived at the market early, setting up her stall with fresh displays of meat and adding an extra touch of her unique blend. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept her head high as she began calling out to potential customers. "Fresh meat! Delicious and perfectly seasoned," she shouted, her voice strong. At first, people glanced at her stall, but many hesitated. The whispers from the previous days still lingered in the air. Danielle took a deep breath and decided to confront the issue head-on. As a group of women walked past, she smiled and waved them over. "You won't find better meat than this in the whole market," she said confidently. One of the women raised an eyebrow. "I've heard some things," she said, her tone uncertain. Danielle didn't flinch. "I guarantee this meat is as fresh as it gets. I'd never sell anything less than perfect." The woman hesitated for a moment, then nodded, deciding to try a piece. As she took a bite, her eyes lit up. "Wow, this is incredible," she exclaimed, then turned to her friends. "You should try this too." By midday, Danielle had won over a few more loyal customers. Despite the rumors, she knew that her quality and honesty would speak louder than any gossip. The next day, as Danielle prepared her stall, two men approached her booth with a menacing air. They weren't regular customers, and their sharp suits and cold expressions made Danielle nervous. They stopped in front of her stall, looking her over. "You're new here," one of the men said, his voice low. "We're here to help you out." Danielle raised an eyebrow, confused. "Help me?" she repeated, glancing at the meat in front of her, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Yeah," the other man chimed in, his smile thin and cold. "The market's a tough place. We're offering protection, you know, for a price." Danielle's stomach dropped. She had heard rumors of gangs operating in the market, but she never thought she would be targeted. "I don't need protection," Danielle replied firmly, meeting their eyes. "I'm doing just fine on my own." The first man shrugged. "Suit yourself," he said, turning to leave. "But if something happens to your stall, well, we won't be able to stop it." The men walked away, leaving Danielle frozen for a moment. Her heart raced, and a knot formed in her stomach. She had heard about gangs in the market, but she didn't realize how real the threat was. She couldn't afford to pay for protection. Determined not to let fear control her, Danielle straightened up and focused on her stall. "I'll figure this out," she whispered to herself. "I won't back down." The following days were filled with tension. Every time Danielle arrived at the market, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. She kept her stall neat and her demeanor confident, but her mind was constantly on the gang's threat. Her competitor's stall seemed to grow in popularity by the day. Customers flocked to his flashy displays, while Danielle's once bustling stall now seemed quieter. She kept her head up and kept working, hoping that her hard work and her commitment to quality would win in the end. One afternoon, as Danielle was serving a customer, she noticed the two men from the gang standing across the market, watching her stall. Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't ignore them anymore. They were waiting for her to cave, to show fear. But Danielle wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. She stood tall, even when her hands trembled. As evening approached, she packed up her stall, still feeling their eyes on her. She had made a decision: she wasn't going to pay them. No matter the consequences. Tomorrow, she would confront them. The next morning, Danielle arrived early, determined to face whatever was coming. As the market slowly filled with customers, she felt a strange chill in the air. The usual noise of the marketplace seemed quieter than usual. Her stall was set up, but her eyes kept darting to the corners, looking for any sign of the two men. Then, she saw them. They were standing across from her stall, talking to someone. Danielle's heart raced. They were watching her. She quickly turned away, pretending to focus on her display, but her mind was spinning. Something wasn't right. As the day went on, strange things started to happen. A few customers complained about the quality of the meat, though they had no reason to. Someone knocked over a crate of fresh cuts, spilling them all over the ground. Danielle hurried to clean up, her hands shaking. Then, as the sun began to set, the two men approached her stall again, their faces unreadable. "We gave you a chance," one of them said, his tone colder than before. "Now you'll learn why you should have paid us." Danielle's heart pounded in her chest as they walked away, disappearing into the crowd. But she wasn't going to let them intimidate her. Suddenly, the ground beneath her felt unstable, as if something bigger was about to happen. Danielle looked at her stall, her breath catching in her throat. This was just the beginning.